All right, everybody, welcome to the 96 Person Bringer podcast. I am your host, Bryan Stoops. From the ages of 7 until I was about 24, I was a professional magician in Southern California. Then, for the last 20 years, I've been focused on courting my wife, marrying my wife, raising our two children, intensely studying the martial arts, and being a professional educator. However, in 2020, I started stand-up comedy. And since then, I've had some interesting results and I've met some interesting people. That brings us to the podcast. This is the inaugural episode of the podcast. And I have guests lined up and I have a schedule and we're going to roll everything out. And however, I need an episode. I need some content. So this episode only, I'm going to serve as the guest. I'm going to run through exactly what I'm going to be asking the guests, the same questions, the same amount of time. That way, potential guests can watch this episode and know what this is all about. Just a quick reminder, depending on where you're watching the shortened version of this content, if you could give a like and either subscribe to the channel or follow, whatever that looks like based on where you're watching the shortened version of this content. It really does make a difference and it really is important. And I really do appreciate it. I'm also just going to name, I'm a little under the weather. That's why my voice sounds the way it does. Pardon me, get a drink of water there. We had also a show last night, stand-up comedy show in Queens that I hosted. So my voice is just a teeny little bit blown out, but I'm going to try and do something I almost never do and talk with an indoor voice during this. And that way I still get my content and everything is good and we can proceed. So this is normally the part of the show where I would absolutely introduce the guest and move forward from there. And so we're going to move right into where we normally would go, which is 15 minutes for my background, whatever else I want to promote. So this would be the part of the show where the guest explains how they got into stand-up comedy, talk about whatever's coming up and whatever they want to promote and anything else. And there's a 15-minute timer, which is going to come on the screen now. So my background, as I mentioned, again, normally this would not be a factor because I would do the show intro the way that I've done it a few minutes ago. But again, my background, this is where the guest would normally be giving us their background. But my background, again, is I grew up in Eastern Los Angeles County, and I was a magician. I did magic all over Southern California from the age of about 7 until about the age of 24. And so I actually did my first show, as I said, when I was 7 years old. My mother, actually, both my parents were involved in running a youth science center, and they were having an event, and they let me put on a magic show. And then a man who had a Cub Scout group saw that show, invited me to do a show for that Cub Scout group, paid me something like $20, which again, this would have been around 1985. And, 1985, 7-year-old perspective, $20 was quite amazing. And so I booked another Cub Scout show from there and another Cub Scout show, and there was a local magic shop a couple cities away. And I used to spend a lot of time there after school and on weekends and got to kind of know that group and start performing. I became a young magician member of the Magic Castle, famous Magic Castle in Hollywood. I would perform there every summer in their Future Stars of Magic week. Is where, because it's a 21 and older club normally, so that's where the young magician members because usually they bring in different magicians every week, Monday through Sunday. And so that was the 1 week a year called Future Stars of Magic Week. And I did Future Stars of Magic Week for maybe 7, 8 years in a row. performing. It was always in the summer, which was nice. We were out of school, and I was on a Saturday morning TV show, an episode with Mario Lopez of Saved by the Bell fame and other things. The late great Harry Blackstone Jr., famous illusionist, was on a television special for Japan's NHK television network. That's one of their, if not their biggest TV networks out there. Performed quite a few places, New Orleans, Orlando. Took 2 quarters off my studies in college. Eventually earned a bachelor's degree in theater, but my sophomore year took 2 quarters off, went to Japan, lived in Japan for 6 months, did 300 hotel shows in Japan during those 6 months. Came back, eventually moved to Las Vegas about a month and a few weeks before 9/11. Very, very strange time, and kind of decimated the tourism industry, and ended up moving back home, and kind of started my path as an educator at that point, and the other things that I mentioned. Excuse me. So 2018, I was leaving a job and looking to go back into the classroom, and we were in a position, we took a shot. We moved to New York City, and we had been coming out here for vacation, maybe once every 2 years, started bringing the kids, and a school out here made me an offer, and we moved out here. And flash forward to late 2019, early 2020, I was doing some traveling related to my martial arts practice. And while I was traveling, I was writing some stand-up comedy. And I'll address why I was doing that in another question later. I've always loved stand-up. I've always watched stand-up. I've always admired stand-ups. And obviously there's, the absolutely incredible stand-up scene here in New York City. So I was writing some material while I was traveling a bit with the intention of doing some open mics and just seeing how things went. And the pandemic started. So I actually started stand-up online. I think in a lot of ways it was an advantage only because I had not already started doing stand-up. So I imagine it would have been a lot harder had I been actively performing, live on stage, and then to just suddenly lose that option. So I got very comfortable with Zoom shows and digital shows, and wrote quite a lot of material. And my perspective, I've discussed this with a lot of stand-ups, it was all new and it was all really fun. I took a stand-up comedy class with an organization that, I've continued to kind of work with here and there as the world opened back up here in New York City. I met several people from the Los Angeles stand-up scene that I still do Zoom shows with and live shows if I go back out there. And because my wife and I go back quite often to visit, as our families are still out there in Southern California. And so when we go out there, I try to book spots ahead of time. And so I met a lot of those people. I've met, it was also just from the standpoint of trying to stay sane in an absolute scary time and a really uncertain time. And it was a great way of just kind of making, a really dark time period a little lighter, and retaining whatever measure of sanity I had to begin with during that time period. And so it was, absolutely as productive as it could be. And so, I mean, in that way, it was kind of positive. And, by 2021, things were opening again. And I went about the business of starting to perform in person. And I still balance a lot of my, like, if you look at my October schedule, I do a fair amount of in-person shows, but I also balance that out with Zoom shows. So I'm working with a group, Sauced in the City. They're doing some live shows in Vegas. I'm going to be participating in one towards the end of the year in December. And then there's Dat Fan is the winner of the first season of Last Comic Standing, and he's got a comedy school and a group, and I'm quite fond of him and that group. So I try to do about one of those shows. That's obviously all. He's in Los Angeles. I should have mentioned that, and so try to do about one of those shows a week. So I really balance out the in-person shows with Zoom comedy, and I find that it's all valuable. Excuse me. So yeah, it's all valuable. It's all flight time. Ultimately, it's all pretty worthwhile. And so just, I mean, highlights. I have performed. I had a residency last summer at Broadway Comedy Club in Manhattan. I performed at the majority of a lot of the major clubs in New York City, and I'm still working my way to Gotham and the Cellar. Those are on the horizon. Haven't quite been there yet. But the majority of the other clubs, I've started producing. I have a regular show that I produced. That was the show last night in Kew Gardens in Queens. And then I have another monthly show that I've sort of inherited in the East Village. We're putting on our second one next week. And it's, in just a short time, I just feel real lucky to have met a lot of great talent. I mean, really, and that was one of the driving forces in starting this, is just the ability to have some in-depth conversations. And I know, you're not seeing or hearing this right now because this is kind of a test episode. I want everybody to see the format. But I just have really enjoyed meeting just, so many interesting, talented, funny, insightful people that share, this went from something that I wanted to kind of try to honestly a little bit of an obsession. And I'm pursuing some things that are sort of like semi-professional in nature this year. And, just really enjoying the journey. So, as far as promotions, I mentioned my regular shows. This past summer, I did my first Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August. I had a 6-day run with a 50-minute show. It was a show that I actually took to the Hollywood Fringe Festival for 2 performances in June. Really enjoy doing a longer show. And, I'm going to talk about goals and goal setting for me and later, but I mean, definitely for me, being in theaters and doing a longer set and developing, being real purposeful about developing an hour or, give or take a few minutes. Hollywood Fringe, I was doing an hour, and Edinburgh, it was 50 minutes. Edinburgh is really like minute by minute. The next show's loading in as you're loading out. The schedule is crazy, but also really exhilarating. And so I have another festival that has been confirmed. That's going to be England. I'm not allowed to go into specifics until the 25th of October, which is when the festival will launch their guidebook and brochures and all the advertising, and I can really go public at that point. But that's locked and set up. And so that'll be a 5-day run, and that'll be a 75-minute version of that show. That hour or that show, if you will, I call Celebrity Girlfriend Draft. I'm really proud of that hour. put a lot of time into it. And so that'll be February. I'll definitely be talking more about that. But that is locked in place. I'm just not allowed to go into details at this time. And so, it's been a lot of exciting things like that. A lot of the comedy clubs here in New York City, a lot of the comedy clubs in Southern California had the opportunity to do the Comedy Store in last December 2022. And that set went really, really well. And that night was just kind of like a dream come true, super fun. Gary Busey, the actor, his ex-wife was one of the comedians on the show, and spent a lot of her set like roasting him. It was all very sweet though. They were talking, he came over to like the comedians area after the show, and they were there, just their physicality. I mean, there's still obviously, even though they're not married anymore, a lot of love there. And then I had the opportunity to talk to him and get a photo, for not to be a name dropper, but it's one of those like surreal, hey, remember that memory that I'll have for the rest of my life. The first time I played the Comedy Store and Gary Busey was in the audience. And, I got the chance to say, I'm a big fan of yours. And he was being nice. And it was after the show. And he said, well, I'm a big fan of yours. And we got to joke around for a couple of minutes. So performed in clubs in New Jersey and Connecticut, and just did a show in Philly a couple weeks ago, Vermont, and just, yes, I'm kind of setting my sights on challenging myself and trying to get in different kinds of venues and have different kinds of opportunities, but also just really, really seriously trying to enjoy the journey and focus on those things. So, everything for me is, you can see the spelling of my name if you're watching with video, but it's Bryan Stoops with a Y, Bryan, spelled correctly. And Stoops is Stoops. So all my socials are either at Bryan Stoops Comedy or bryanstoopscomedy.com is the website. And you can follow me there. Gotten some really interesting results. Just about to hit 100,000 views for stand-up on YouTube. Have about 80,000 views on another app in social media, and it's just been a really exciting time. So I think I'm going to stop this here. That's right about on time. And so we move into the next question. Again, normally I would be asking this of my guests. And so, but again, I want to have something that people can get a sense of what this is all about, and they can watch and do their thing. So this next question, who are your comedic influences and what do they mean to you? And I have 5 minutes and the timer has already started. The goal of the show is to have an hour. Comedians are always working on their hour. So we have a nice, concise, insightful conversation in an hour's time, and we call it a day. My primary comedic influence that got me really thinking about doing stand-up again, sorry to jump on the train with everybody else, but John Mulaney. My daughter and I in particular, and then eventually everybody in the family, I really noticed him from Kid Gorgeous at Radio City. That was his third special. And so I watched his specials on Netflix in reverse order. So I watched Kid Gorgeous first, Comeback Kids second, and then New in Town third. And initially also sort of appreciated them in that descending order. Kid Gorgeous will remain my favorite special of his. Even, we saw what became Baby J. We saw that at Madison Square Garden. The family went, and that was prior to him releasing it as a special. And I like that block of material, to be sure, but Kid Gorgeous for me is just really, really special. And Mulaney, obviously, absolutely incredible. Everybody's, there's a lot has been said and written. Straight, stand-up, when I think about stand-up, Patton Oswalt is somebody that's had a big old influence on me. His early stuff, so incredibly dark. And then obviously he lost his first wife, and his sort of journey through grief, but then sort of powering through for the sake of his daughter, and then falling in love with another woman and kind of rediscovering joy and hope. I'm a huge fan of his as a comedian. I'm also just kind of a huge fan of his as a man, and like this cycle of depression and joy and negativity and positivity that he's gone through. I'm just a big old fan all the way around. Mark Maron is somebody, I was watching some of his recent work, and I really I just like the guy, and I'm in my mid-40s, and so I'm a little closer to his age than some of the younger comedians, but I just a big fan of his. He's also another really insightful, really super talented. I mean, none of these are, like jaw-dropping revelations. I know a lot of people are fans of the people that I'm mentioning. Catherine Ryan comes from Canada. She lives in the United Kingdom now. She's she's a big deal in the United Kingdom, and I'm a big old fan of hers. I think she's fearless, and I think she's positive, and I like what she puts out into the world, and she's super funny. And I mean, everything from her specials to chat shows, interview clips, I just think she's amazing all around. Taylor Tomlinson, somebody like a lot of us that, I watched that first special during the pandemic, immediately became a fan. She's obviously been at it a long time. She's really incredible. And then the jump, and I acknowledge I'm, nothing, but I mean, just the jump as a comedy fan, the level of her writing was already so high, and then you get to Look at You as a second special, and there's this exponentially incredible jump. She was already amazing, and then the second special was just like jaw-droppingly amazing, and so I'm a big fan of hers. Eliza, again, I like what Eliza puts into the world in terms of her positivity and what she's trying to do. And I just remain a big old fan. John Oliver, Jon Stewart, Seth Meyers, Colbert. That's a real kind of special group of guys. I saw Seth Meyers at Caroline's right after things opened back up in New York City, and I was just, I don't even know if I should be doing this. He was so good. So those are some people that mean a lot to me. All right, so time is up there. We're going to move on to our next question. And again, normally I would be asking this of my guests, but today everybody's stuck with me. This way you get an idea of what the show is all about. So doing stand-up is hard. Why do you do it? Or why do I do it? So again, it was something it was something I started during the pandemic. It was something I was doing online. It was something I had time, like a lot of people, I had a lot of time on my hands. I had time to put energy into it. It was really fun. It's, if you do stand up, it's a roller coaster ride at its best. And a lot of the time, it's really fun. Sometimes, maybe in a sick way, even when things aren't going so well, in some kind of sick, twisted way, it's really fun. I like people. I like meeting people. And I've had a couple smaller audiences recently, it's okay, where I kind of said, hey, you know what? When you have a big old show, you put on the best show you can for the big old audience. And when you have a smaller show, you put on the best show you can for that single digit number of people in the room, because no matter what, those people have given you their most precious non-renewable natural resource, which is their time. And so I have a joke about this that I'm working on. It really does take something. I don't want to be cliched, and I don't want to come off as egotistical when I say this, but I mean, it really does take something. And this goes beyond stand-up to a lot of different careers, a lot of different industries. It really does take something special to think to yourself, you know, I see the world slightly differently, and I'm going to ask people to part with their time, and given your level of success and eventually their money, to hear me express my perception, which I think is unique about how I see the world. And that's really, at its core, that's really stand-up. And so I keep a notebook. I definitely record every set and I'll talk about this a little bit more in another question. I take notes as far as ideas for stand-up on my phone. That way I can actually read them, the world's worst penmanship. But I keep a notebook where I do an entry about every set and every show that I do. And so that kind of charts my journey. I'll be real honest, I do quantify, I do kind of count my reps, because again, it's really important. This is a Penn and Teller concept. The idea, you know, if you want to be an airline pilot, you need flight time. There's no way that you're going to be able to fly a plane unless you have flight time. So getting back to the answer to this question, it's that opportunity to meet an audience and share with them your unique perception as far as what you're working on in terms of your material, that keeps kind of bringing me back again. And at its core, again, it's really fun. Sometimes it can be soul crushing, it can be heartbreaking. As it's been communicated to me again and again, the attrition rate is nutso. But when people talk about an endeavor like something that you have to do this thing, that's sort of at this time how I'm feeling about things. When I restarted this very early, when I got back live on stage, I was also given the opportunity to do some magic again. I'm still in the process of refiguring out what my relationship is with magic, theatrical magic. I know what my relationship is with stand-up, and that seems like a sustainable relationship right now, given my goals and how it's feeding my soul in terms of being up on stage performing again. So there you go. So that's we time people on the show, not, again, to try to keep everybody to an hour, because again, a lot of comedians are always working on their next hour. And so what is your process for writing and sculpting material? And again, we're going to start with our very first guest. They're already scheduled. These are going to be exactly the same questions. It's going to be exactly the same amount of time. This way, again, why is he recording an episode with his voice sounding like this? It's so that everybody can kind of see the format and understand what we're doing. All right, so we're on for 5 minutes. What is my process for writing and sculpting material? So as I mentioned, my phone is always with me, right? I think a lot of us feel that way, because wallet, keys, phone, right? The three objects that I never leave the house without. Because my phone is always with me, I use just the notepad feature on my phone for jotting down ideas. And so I'll share this. And again, especially as we start to get different guests on here. And I already have the first 3 guests lined up, and I'm already starting to chart who I'd like to get on here. You know, we're going to get different answers. And so my hope is that for people who do comedy or aspire to do comedy, or even are just fans of comedy, and maybe you want to kind of hear about, you know, how the gears work, if you will, that you'll get different insights and different perspectives. And so for me, I don't work for the company. I really don't, but I have a separate Google account for comedy. And so what I like to do when I write on computer. And the only time that I don't do that is if I'm so haunted by an idea that I've got to take it down. I mean, I'll write it down by hand, but eventually I'm always going to type it up, because what I'm doing is I'm typing it up as a Google Doc, and then it lives in that account. And I have it on all my devices. I can log in, I can take a look at it, I can refine it, I can make multiple copies. That's another thing that I like to do, is as I draft it, I make multiple copies along the way. And so that's my process for initial ideas to writing. And then for me, it's a matter of getting it on stage or getting it on Zoom. So I have a new bit that I'm working on, and I acknowledge it's a little convoluted, and it's very me. I know the way that I write, and I know this might just be the lamest thing in the world, but I don't have another way of articulating this, and I have 2 minutes. I know what a good Bryan Stoops bit is like by now, and I know the way that I write for myself. And a lot of my bits, I'm not really talking about an intellectual endeavor here. They're multi-layered. They're a little wordy initially, and then I like the verb sculpting. I'm trying to like chisel away a little bit at the inessential words. And eventually for me, it comes down to it's very musical, and that's the way it's going to go. And so record ideas as they come to me on my phone, type them up initially on computer. And I know different people have different approaches. I know a lot of people say, you know, don't try to be funny, just get it down. I don't do that. I start writing it with the eye on getting it quasi performable as soon as possible. And then I want to put it in front of people and different kinds of people, and in between. So I'll share this with my last few seconds here. So this new bit that I acknowledge is a little bit convoluted, I did it for the first time in a Zoom show on Friday. Wasn't so great. Mentally refined a couple things, did it last night, and it went exponentially better. Is it ready, like full signed, sealed, delivered? No, but that's the process. So there you go. All right, time is up for that question. A little bit more insight. While I'm moving things along here, what I would say is just make sure you find yourself a system where you can, you know, you really archive your writing as you go, and it's safe. All right, anyways, describe something you're working on right now in your comedy: a bit, a skill, marketing, an hour, anything. Okay, so I'm at kind of an interesting point right now. So what I mentioned earlier, Celebrity Girlfriend Draft, that's the name of the show that I took to the Hollywood Fringe. That's the show that I took to the Edinburgh Fringe. That's the show, you're the hour, even though I'm doing a 75-minute version in England in February, even though I did a 50-minute version in Edinburgh, comedians are usually talking about their hour, their current hour, their next hour. So I like that hour. I'm gonna refine it a bit, and I need to pull one bit that I was very encouraged by this. I felt there was really only one bit that didn't quite work for UK audiences in Scotland. And so I'm going to pull that before I go to England. I'm going to replace it because the couple nights that it killed were when I had people, because Edinburgh is obviously very international. And so I had people from the United States and they loved it. But the people from the UK, there was a group from England and they were like, yeah, that, except for that bit, we liked everything. We just didn't get that bit, So it's not like that hour is finished, the world's greatest thing ever that anybody ever wrote. But I like that hour and I feel good about that hour. And while I'm still performing that hour, I'm honestly pondering maybe self-producing a final, or at least a publicly presentable version of that hour. And then what I'm starting to work on right now is my next hour. And so my second to last show in Edinburgh, I'll share this. I was struck by the feeling. I was having a really great time, and I was struck by the feeling that moment, having just wrapped up my second to last show at my first time at the Edinburgh Fringe, I had this profound feeling that all the great moments in my life, including that moment, were interconnected in some way. That gave me an idea for my next hour. And so I had an in-person show last week where I had a little bit of downtime from work before the show. And I went and just had a little something to eat. And I really got down to the business of just kind of mapping or outlining that show. So right now I'm actively working on my second hour. And I'm very cognizant of like the sophomore slump, right? I've seen this in a lot of facets in my life. Like my sophomore year of high school, I had a great time in high school and like nothing too terrible happened during any of the 4 years, but my sophomore year was my least favorite year of high school. For many, many years, I wanted to be a high school administrator. My second of the 3 years I was a high school administrator was a really challenging year. So I'm really feeling like this is coming slow and it's okay. Like I have a bit about the zombie apocalypse that my wife heard it for the first time in a Zoom show recently. And she's like, yeah, you should never perform that again. And that bit's either gotten that response, like dead silence, or people loved it. There's no in between. So I'm working on my second hour right now. I'm working on that sophomore batch of material. I'm also really just enjoying posting shorts on social media. I'm very close to, as I've only been doing this since June of this year. This is October. I'm about to hit 100,000 views on YouTube. And I know for some people, those are baby numbers. But I mean, 6 months ago, I was looking at people with 1 million views saying, oh, I could never do that. I know it's a bit in the future, but it's on the horizon. So I'm enjoying doing that consistently. Right. So Let me move things forward here. I'm going to grab some water. Let me just get a drink. All right. Describe any positive milestone in your comedy experience. Let me get 5 on the clock here. Here we go. Okay. I've already sort of spoken about this, but the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, 6-day run this past, late August of 2023, a dream, like absolute dream. And so I did the Hollywood Fringe. That was a really nice experience. I did I flew in on a Thursday morning, and there were some interesting hiccups where I barely caught my plane. Got in, got very caffeinated, did some tech, went away to a coffee shop across the street from the venue, ran the show in my head, went and did the first show, and it was great. Had a day to rest, and then did another show Saturday, and then went out with some friends Saturday evening, and then flew home Sunday. And while that was slightly, stressful, this is where I grew up. So my friends came to the show, some comedian friends came to the shows, some martial arts friends came to the shows, my family came to the shows, my folks, my best friends came to the shows, and so the only honestly real stress about that was kind of promoting the 2 performances and just finding an audience. It's hard enough. Sometimes it's hard getting 4 people together to have a dinner, much less. And this is a very small, I think we sat 22 times 2, right? So there's only 40 something seats available between both performances. So Edinburgh, I don't know anybody there, right? How am I going to promote the show? It took me a couple days to establish my routine. But by the time Wednesday rolled around, I didn't even need my phone anymore for like where my venue was relative to where I was staying, relative to the Royal Mile, for going out there and, they call it flyering when you go out there and sell your wares. I also discovered that I guess I'm a pushy New Yorker now. So like having no fear about, we call it barking here in New York City, that was really helpful. And so Edinburgh was just, I'll be completely honest, there were elements of that where I could have done a little bit more prior to the festival, but I was a little paralyzed by stress and uncertainty. And so thankfully, I only sort of paid the price for that in a very minimal way. I had smaller audiences. I had an audience. I felt good about it. It was a positive experience. If I had a time machine, would I have done it differently? Sure. But I mean, it worked out 96%, the best it possibly could, not knowing what I know. So now, and I felt this way sitting in the airport waiting for the plane to fly home, I kind of feel like I went to International Comedy Festival College. And so this thing I mentioned in England, which I can't go into detail about, and some other opportunities that I'm just really, really, really excited about. And I'm ready to just maximize. I'm not going to be shy. There's no reason to be, because I even though I haven't been there, I kind of know what to expect in a way. I also would just say, I know I shared about this. It's last December, And I already kind of told you the story, you know, got to play the Comedy Store for the first time in Hollywood. And it was just a super surreal, fun, crazy evening. And like I mentioned, you know, Gary Busey was there, some other comedian friends that I got to meet in person as opposed to Zoom. They were there, and it was just a magical, memorable night. Really, really fun. All right. So moving on. So same thing. I am going to grab some water. And again, if you are audio only, thank you for putting up with my slightly incapacitated voice here, but I think I'm doing all right. All right, so describe a time you learned an important comedy lesson by having a negative experience. Okay, so depending on the, you know, I have 5 minutes, but we'll see. I might be able to squeeze in more than one here, but what comes to mind, so as I shared, I started on Zoom, and I really liked doing Zoom comedy, and I felt it was as positive an experience as it possibly could have been. 2021, things start opening again. It becomes possible with precautions to start doing in-person open mics and performances again. So I did a couple open mics, and then I did, pardon me, grab another drink here. I did the industry room at Broadway Comedy Club, which is basically a bringer audition. And that show has the potential to go really, really, really well. Because think about it, right? You're loading up the room with family and friends. They know it's kind of an audition. And that was an evening that went incredibly well. Incredibly well. And I had done open mics. I had done another bringer showcase prior to that. And that bringer showcase was my first time. I did a couple open mics, and then I did that bringer showcase, and it went as well as it could. Like, I didn't die. It was a solid 5 out of 10, maybe 6 minus. I definitely didn't die. I got some laughs. I actually invented a line that's still in that chunk to this day that I really like. I came up with it on the spot. So, you know, there were some good things that came out of it. But I experienced that initial showcase. I really lost time. My adrenaline, despite all my background in performing, you know, that doesn't mean anything. It's a whole other set of muscles when it comes to doing stand-up. I really, like, time sped up. The adrenaline dump was crazy. And I didn't really chill out until I got the light. I was doing a 5-minute set. And then by that point, I was wrapping up. So this time that I started talking about at Broadway, it went incredible. I mean, relative to my inexperience at that time, it went absolutely incredible. Got a great response. I did not experience that whole like adrenaline dump. Like, I was very cognizant of the 5 minutes and felt really good about it. I ended up not getting a residency, but I got development spots, which was super encouraging at that time. You know, I had just transitioned from Zoom comedy to like performing in person. So it was a super positive experience. Okay, here's the lesson. I really thought, oh, that experience that I had at Broadway, I really thought that's gonna be stand-up now. Like, I did it, guys. I did all this training, online, and now now I've reached a level. No, absolutely not. And so it was a very steep learning curve, but I learned this lesson very, very quickly. You know, if you're really serious about this, you have so many shows that you owe your destiny that are going to go horribly, absolutely horribly. And there's no way around it. You know, I have a comedian friend in LA. He's been doing this forever, you know, and he always reminds me, dude, I saw Robin Williams bomb. Robin Williams, right? Like one of the greatest, most unique, one of the best people to ever do this, the sharpest minds in real time. Everybody's done it. Everybody has to do it along their pathway. So that was a really important lesson that I learned by virtue of a negative experience. I learned it very, very quickly. All right, let's transition here. Aside from maybe fame and monetary success, please describe what a dream comedy legacy would look like for you. So let me initially approach this removed, I hope, removed from ego. Then I'll go back to ego just a little bit, and then I'll move away from ego again and wrap this up. I'm really enjoying putting energy into this right now, into stand-up, into comedy, and it's coming at an ideal time in my life. You know, my wife works for a theater company. She loves that theater company. They love her. It's an ideal time period for her. My son is my oldest. He's 16. Is my amazing kid on the autism spectrum. You know, he's made so much progress. He loves living in New York City. His life is so good. He's doing homeschooling this year, but he's got, like, he does piano lessons. He's in a play. Like, his life is super awesome right now. My daughter just started. She's a freshman at this really cool performing arts high school in Manhattan. She auditioned her way. It was her top choice. She got in, she took it. Like, I couldn't be more proud of her. Everybody's doing their thing. Everybody's doing their thing, including me. So, I mean, my day job, I'm still a high school teacher. I'm back performing and I love it. And I'm addicted. And these shows I'm producing right now, the comedians that I'm being lucky enough to work with, and these are the people I'm going to be, you know, I want to feature them as guests. These are the people I'm going to be talking to on this podcast. No ego, like, I'm getting these really incredible people. Hey, I talked to so-and-so at such and such show or festival, and they said you're like a really good producer. Do you have anything? Do you have any shows coming up? Do you have any spots you can give me? And so that I take that opportunity really seriously, to be able to work with people in a positive way, in a professional way, in an encouraging way. I don't know that, you know, I'm not saying like I'm world's greatest producer, but I'm really enjoying it. And I'm really enjoying meeting all these incredible people who share the same obsession with sharing with people, you know, this unique way, this funny way in which you see the world. And so it like in my family, it's everybody's time right now. It's my time to pursue this. So everything I'm putting out, like on social media, all the shows I'm doing, I just hope people enjoy it. I hope it lightens up their day. And I hope, again, I don't know if this is ego-y, like, I'm putting a lot of energy into this. I feel like I have something unique to say, and I hope people are enjoying that. Here's the truly ego-filled part. I grew up performing. There were a ton of people in my life that, maybe it's like, Bryan went and became a teacher, and I love being an educator, and I put a ton of energy into being the best educator that I can be. And I think I put a lot of good into the world. I know the ultimate form of validation is not needing the validation, but I also just hope some of the people in my life are enjoying watching me, enjoying performing again. And then, lastly, this is my perspective. Like one of the shows that I produced, that it's literally called the Just Edgy Enough Comedy Show. I don't judge anybody who does this. Like, my style is very non-confrontational. I want my audiences to be comfortable because I want to share my experiences and my perspective. I want them to leave feeling like they know me. So I want to keep that up and keep putting energy into that approach because I think it's worthwhile. And that's the way I want to be doing things. All right, let's move on here. All right, so 10 minutes, episode wrap up, any kind of reminders, and then just a general ending. And these will be the last 10 minutes of the show, and then we're done. So for anybody who's going to watch this, those are the questions. This is the format. Once again, I know you know this already if you've been watching the episode. This episode hasn't been about narcissism. This way, everybody can see kind of what I'm thinking and how things will work. Imagine me asking these questions as somebody else, same time frames, and that is how we're going to proceed. And so once again, if you have enjoyed this and you're listening or watching the shortened version of this episode, depending on where you're seeing it, if you can leave a like and either subscribe or follow me, it really does make a heck of a difference, and I really appreciate it. And feel free, you can comment as well, if anything resonated with you, or if you have any thoughts or opinions about the format. I look forward to hearing those. Or if I didn't mention something, or if you have a question about anything that I said, please leave that. Once again, for me, Bryan with a Y, Bryan Stoops, Stoops, Bryan Stoops Comedy. So bryanstoopscomedy.com is my website. And you also, when you go to bryanstoopscomedy.com, you can put in your email address, and as a thank you for putting in your email address, you can watch a 15-minute set. And I don't email my list all that often. I don't write like daily or anything like that. It's not affiliate marketing. I'm usually just sharing some kind of insights and kind of letting you know what I'm up to and letting you know about shows that are coming up. And sometimes I'll share a story, if I come back from a really great show, or if I meet somebody cool, or if I see somebody cool, or if I have some experience, I might kind of share that. But I try not to blow up people's inboxes too much. But, going to bryanstoopscomedy.com and just putting in your best email address is a great way of staying in touch with me. The Whiskey Cellar, this is going to go out early enough. The Whiskey Cellar is formerly, it used to be Cellar 77. That's in the East Village in Manhattan. Next Sunday, 1 week from today, Sunday, October 15th, 2023 at 6 p.m., we have the Just Edgy Enough comedy show. And that show is completely complimentary. We do not charge for tickets. Guests just need to buy 2 drinks from the venue to support the venue. We have a different lineup than we did last month. It's going to be really, really fun. That show will always be the third Sunday of every month. So, I mean, I would imagine, unless there's some crazy holiday or something like that, and in which case, obviously, we'd move it or reroute it. We'll let you know ahead of time. But the next one for sure, is coming up next week. And once again, that's a complimentary show. We do not charge for tickets. There's no catch, literally no catch. There's no upsells or anything. I hate that word, but there's not, all you need to do is purchase 2 drinks from the venue. And if cash is an issue or money is an issue, you can buy 2 soft drinks, come in and enjoy really, a 90-minute stand-up comedy show. It's a really cool little venue. If you've never been there, we seat about 20 in that little, it's got like a speakeasy vibe downstairs. It's a really cool venue. So please come out and join us for that. We also have another Kew Gardens comedy show that's at Austin's Ale House in Kew Gardens, Queens. And that one is going to be Thursday, October 26th at 8 p.m. And that one, I've got an absolutely incredible lineup. Tickets are only $10 each. And then there is a $2 drink minimum from the venue. But again, you're avoiding that like $25 to $35 a head ticket charge in Manhattan to see a very similar caliber show. I've got absolutely great people. My headliner last night is a guy who's been opening up for Hassan Minhaj, literally. And I know, like, when I heard that, I was like, BS. Of course, I didn't say BS, but I thought the full phrase. And then I saw the video. Sure enough, like 2,000 seat theater opening up for Hassan Minhaj. So really good. We have we never have the same lineup. Sometimes I do bring people back that I've worked with before if they're really, really funny, but I try to switch it up because, again, that lets me meet new people, and frankly, like later, possible guests for this show. So, please make sure, again, if you bryanstoopscomedy.com and then you put in your best email address, or another way is Instagram. So at Bryan Stoops Comedy. And, for sure, there will always be a link in my bio to the ticket link. We also do a ticket link for the show at the Whiskey Cellar, even though it's complimentary, just for a head count, because it is such a small venue. We don't want to make, if 30 people are expecting to come see, they're not all going to fit. So we want to make sure that we actually know who is going to show up. So again, make sure either, you're subscribed, bryanstoopscomedy.com, or follow me on Instagram at Bryan Stoops Comedy. I'm also on TikTok as well as at Bryan Stoops Comedy. And I just tend to do a post a day on TikTok. And that's been kind of cool. I know people have different feelings about TikTok, but the hashtag Bryan Stoops Comedy, I think, is at just about 40,000 views, and just the hashtag Bryan Stoops, again spelled correctly with a Y, is sitting at about like 35 or 37,000. And again, why am I saying this? For anybody who's just a casual comedy fan, club bookers today care about those things. And so if you're like, oh man, he's being real shallow, some days it does feel shallow. For example, I just had, and again, I know for some people these are baby numbers, but for me, I'm watching all this happen for the very first time. And it's just kind of cool because I've only really been playing this game since June of this year. I just had my first video on a short on Instagram that got 10,000 views. And I just thought that was kind of cool. And I mean, it didn't change my life. It didn't, I didn't call the school and I'm a comedian now. It's just kind of neat to think that many people, watch so many seconds of your stupid joke about how your wife never answers your phone calls, which is, 95% rooted in truth. She's taken like 3 of my calls in the 20 years we've been together. I'm just kidding. So, please make sure you're keeping up with me on social media, and please make sure you're keeping up with me on YouTube. If you just search Bryan Stoops Comedy, you'll find me right away. And again, a like some of the shorts and a subscription. You can turn your notifications off, frankly, if it's a hindrance. And the other thing about Instagram is Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Bryan Stoops Comedy. And groups are nice because, every time I post there, I tend to only post once a day about, you get a notification, but the Facebook and Instagram and Threads is typically where I'm posting my monthly schedule, and email. I'm usually a little bit more diligent about reminding you about the shows I'm producing myself, unless a producer friend whose show I'm on, also really wants the promotion, then I'm happy to do that as well. So please make sure you're keeping up with me on social media. Everything tends to be at Bryan Stoops Comedy or bryanstoopscomedy.com. We got the show at the Whiskey Cellar on the 15th of October and the show at Austin's Ale House on October 26th. Otherwise, I am out of time. I hope you enjoyed this inaugural episode of the 96-person Bringer podcast. Again, this was kind of like a sample episode, but this is going to be the format, and we're going to start rolling out regular episodes with incredible guests very, very soon. If you enjoyed this, please let me know with a comment. But thank you so much for being here. And once again, I really hope you enjoyed this. All right. Until the next episode, everybody, take care. Bye for now.